Hello and welcome back to Like Maria. Today I'm going to talk to you about another poem of the decade. It's Alan Jenkins' poem Effects, and it's on the Edexcel A-level literature specification. It's a great poem, so even if you're not studying it, come along for the journey. Today I'm going to divide the poem up into three areas. I'm going to talk about its title and the whole idea of effects. I'm going to talk about this key symbol in the poem of hands, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of the poem, because although this is quite a free structure in many regards, there are elements of it that I think are definitely worth commenting about. So please like and subscribe, and let's get started. So to begin with, we have this title, this one word noun phrase, effects. And it has two distinct meanings here. Number one is quite literally the concrete noun, which is the effects of someone when they have passed away. And this is what you are given in the hospital, the immediate things that they own. So it might be their purse, their wallet, even their bus pass, and more usually a watch and some jewellery and a chain and things like this. And it's a very poignant moment when you go to the hospital and you're given the effects of the deceased person. It's kind of almost reducing them to the things that they owned. And there is a very specific meaning here of effects, the effects of someone who is deceased. It's that little bag of things that you are given. Of course, the other meaning of effects is more emotional. It's not a concrete noun. It's more of an abstract noun, and it's to do with the emotion, the effect that someone had on you, or the effect that you had on them, or the effect that they had on the world. And here I very much think that the child is reflecting on the effect that the mother had on him, and perhaps to some extent the effect that he had on the mother in his later years. So it's a poem kind of two halves of emotion, the emotions that he feels for the mother, and her passing, but also the emotion that he feels in terms of a maturity coming along in his own life. So we have these two really distinct meanings, and I think a good way of looking at this is that the poem itself is another meaning of effects. The poem itself is almost a container, a bag of memories of the mother and of her last moments as well. So we could say that the poem itself is almost like the little bag. It's articulating the things that are left about this mother. And the things that are left are her care, her cooking, her chopping and slicing, her role as a wife and being attached to her husband. And her role as a mother changing over those years to one that slightly irritated the child and the speaker in the poem. The speaker talks about how he would disdain the things that she did and how he learned contempt. So there is that role shift from being a wife, which she loses, from being a mother, which she then loses, and a progression towards the effects that she has on her older child, and the shift in the balance there in their relationship. This is seen throughout the poem, and in particular regarding the symbol of the hands, which is the next thing I want to talk about. The symbol of the hands, we get straight away. I held her hand. Now this changes later on in the poem to the hand I held. And the son is reflecting back on a childhood. I held her hand. That's what I did when I was a child. But when we complete the line, that was always scarred, we get the sense that actually he's holding her hand now in the hospital and now in a different place. And it's preparing us for the end of that poem. The hand is worn. The hand is one of work. The hand has the rings on and it has the watch on. But this changes throughout the poem, and the symbol at the end, the watch is gone, the rings are gone, and she only has the hospital bracelet. So there is a lack of identity at the end of the poem. She has become somebody that has passed away. She has relinquished these roles almost. She's been stripped from her jewellery and from the purpose that she had to do with her hands. On the hand I held, a blotched and crinkled hand, whose fingers couldn't clasp mine anymore. The hand has become hopeless, it has become useless, it cannot clasp anymore because she has passed away, she's dead. And this is the moment that he starts reflecting on his childhood. I held her hand that was always scarred from chopping and slicing. That was a very active hand. So the symbol of a hand is central to this poem, and of course it's central to people's identities. We get the fingerprints that we have. Our hands are very recognisable and we use them to do things, particularly I think to care for others. But this mother has reached a place where she can't care for her son anymore, and she can't falteringly wave even or fumble at the sleeve. So a sense of powerlessness here for the mother at the end of the poem, and the son is reflecting on that and grieving for the time when he could hold her hand, that hand that was so active in his care and that he had some disdain for, but now of course he is reflecting on that and being troubled by that disdain. The last thing I want to talk about is about structure. Now, very loosely speaking here, we have two long sentences. One could argue for a third sentence towards the end, but I'm going to talk about two key ones here. We have I held her hand, and then and her watch, a new sentence partway down that first page as it's printed in the Poems of the Decade. And he's kind of triggered out of his old memories of childhood into the present, and her watch. She always had her watch, and where is that now? It's not there. This is unfamiliar. And then we move on into the description of Mum's life without the husband. So it's before, when he was a child, when they were all there, and then now, after that caesura in the middle of the poem and her watch, it's about the mum's life when she lost the husband and when the children were going back to take care for her. As I said, there's a possibility of a third section at the end when he's clearly observing the mother's dead body, but now she lay here, and he brings us right back into the presence with that deictic word here, pointing to the body in front of him. So, three distinct parts dealing with three distinct phases of life, if you like. But I like the way that this poem builds up clause upon clause, particularly in that second section, and her watch. And I'd never known her, not in all the years, not all the weeks I'd come, not later in the psychiatric ward. So we've got those adverbial phrases there building up and just sort of talking about the distress that the child is feeling and how it escalates for him. And he's kind of incredulous. She's lost the jewellery, she's lost her identity, and she didn't have it. Never was she seen without these things, and particularly her watch. And then he transitions then into the present, where we see the more recent history of the mother's decline, presumably into dementia, and where she blinked and stared and took her pills. So within this stream of consciousness, I would say it is organised into these three areas, and I think all the more effective for that. And we see at the very end the reality of the dead body in front of him, and the reality and the starkness and the bluntness of experiencing these effects being handed on. So that's by no means everything to do with the poem that you would want to consider, but I think it's useful to just look at it in those three terms, looking at effects and what that means, looking at the key symbol of the hands, and then interrogating the structure. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Please like and subscribe, and come back for more Poems of the Decade.